warm welcome to each one of you. So lovely. As always, I say it every time, and it's true for me every time. So wonderful to see your faces, to be here practicing together, and just to be together as a community, wherever we are in the world. We have folks from all over the place as well. Beautiful. So please go ahead and mute your mics, anybody who hasn't already done so, except for Claudia, who is our simultaneous Spanish interpreter for today. And this is the Sunday Sunday Sounds of Dhamma program. So we will, as usual, meditate for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then I'll offer Dhamma reflection, and we'll have plenty of time for some reflections of your own and some questions or comments or sharing that you'd like to do. And then we'll close with the dedication of merits. I think today, I think that today what I want to suggest is that we will begin with some mindfulness of body, and then we'll skip ahead to mindfulness of mind. So that's the plan. And the only reason to tell you the plan is just so that you can observe whether you are able to follow the method or not, without a lot of judgment, just so that you can tell for yourself, what happens there when you attempt to point the attention at various types of phenomena. So just beginning by establishing your meditation posture. Sensing the weight of the body on your seat, or on the bed or the couch, wherever you might be practicing today. And allowing the bones of the spine to line up as best as possible. So that the muscles of the back and the chest and the shoulders might be able to soften and become wider and relaxed. And opening the attention to the whole body at once. The body all the way from the top of the head to the toes. And perhaps as you become attentive to the body, you notice that some parts of the body are very stable and still, and other parts are in slight motion. It's moving with the breath or moving to balance you. Just watching, just observing the stillness and the movement. Now, having settled the mind on the body for some time, you might also have noticed the mind itself, the thoughts and the mental activity arising and ceasing. So then turning the mind to that, to thoughts and sensations in the mind itself. Staying curious about the mental activity and perhaps noticing the beginning and the presence and the cessation of an individual thought. In these last few moments of the meditation, just checking in with the quality of the mind. Is it spacious or constrained? How does the mind feel in this moment? Does it feel wide or narrow? All right, friends. That brings us to the end of the meditation part of our program. And as usual, if you have any reflections or questions about that, we can talk about that at the end after the Dhamma talk. How's the sound? Is it okay? All right. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Bhutang dhammang sanghang namasami. So yesterday, as we were leaving the the autumn gathering, Krista was mentioning about the one copy of the Dhammapada that's here in the library, which is huge. It's a big tome. I didn't bring it to show you on the screen, but anyway, it's several inches thick, and that's quite unusual. It's a copy of it's a translation of the Dhammapada into Spanish, and it has the commentary of the person's teacher. Venerable Nandisena made this translation of his teacher, a Theravada Venerable there in California that he practiced with for many years. So in any event, it's this huge book. And then we said, and then Kristen said, but it's nice that the Dhammapada is actually this small. So maybe you can see this one on screen. This is a new version of the Dhammapada that has entered the library here at the vihara, because it's a translator that I had not seen before. And the Dhammapada, so it means sayings, or pada also can mean like the path, the way, steps. And this is from the Khuddaka Nikayas, from the grouping of the so-called minor discourses. But the minor discourses actually includes many of the most famous teachings of the Buddha, and actually some thought to be definitely the oldest versions of the teachings. So the Dhammapada is a collection of some very, very short verses that some are taken from other parts of the suttas, but there are a few in here actually that I think are particular to this very short collection. And because it's short, then it's been translated many, 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 many times. And it's also verse form, so it's a little poetic and there's room for interpretation there in some ways. But there's a bit of the Dhammapada that I wanted to share with you. So for all of $7.95, you too can have some fabulous wisdom teachings. And this translator, this is, let me make sure I get his name right, Byron, Thomas Byrom, B-Y-R-O-M. As a translation made all the way back in 1976, but it's the first time I saw it. It was about a couple months ago. And so the theme that I want to bring forth today is something about the mind, and hopefully this will unfold in a way that is useful for you. And that's why we did the meditation on examining the mind, because much of what we need to learn in practice, particularly in meditation, I would say, is the degree to which we can shape our mental experience and the ways in which we cannot. And it's very important to be clear about the difference between those two things. Which are the things that can be shaped and which are the things that cannot? Because our resistance or confusion about things that cannot be changed is the place of suffering, is the place where we experience what I think of as rope burn, right? We're holding on to something that by its nature is slipping through our grasp. So this investigation, time and time again, enables us to start to experience what's unique each time and what's the same each time. If we speak about it in a very, very, sort of simple, straightforward methodology, so to speak. So, and the Buddha speaks to this kind of implicitly in a series of verses in the Dhammapada in a section about the elephant. So some of you know that the elephant is near and dear to many different traditions, actually, and many different cultures. And so this is a section of the Dhammapada in which he likens a practitioner to an elephant. And this is the translation here. I really appreciate, I'm going to say, the poetic way in which Byron has done this. He says, "Do not carry with you your mistakes. Do not carry your cares. Travel on alone like an elephant in the forest. Do do not carry your mistakes or your cares. It doesn't mean don't be present for your mistakes and your cares. It means don't allow them to be a weight on you. Right? There's a very, oh wow, suddenly I think of this story about Suzuki Roshi. So Shunryu Suzuki was a founder of San Francisco Zen Center, a Japanese man who came over to the United States in the 60s. And I believe in the 60s, maybe even in the late 50s. In any event, Suzuki Roshi was at Tassajara one day and he pointed to this big boulder. So Tassajara is in this valley in the Ventana Wilderness in California. And because of the creek and the way that the valley has evolved over time, there are some very, very large rocks just kind of planted around the grounds. And he pointed to someone and he said, I have a question for you. And this person says, hi, of course, like, yes, that's what we do. We say yes to the questions of our teacher. And he says, is the boulder heavy or not? And the person says, well, yes, of course, the boulder is heavy. And Suzuki Roshi says, only if you try to carry it. The boulder's only heavy if you carry it. Yeah? And in the same way, our cares, our worries, the pain of our lives, the request of the practice is for us to, as much as possible, drop that off moment by moment and be with what is and be with that ever-changing kaleidoscope of experience, which is not all of one flavor. So he says, do not carry with you your mistakes. Do not carry your cares. Travel on alone like an elephant in the forest. And then this next part is very sweet because it says, okay, well, now that you have freed up all this mental space by not carrying around your cares, it says, to have friends in need is sweet.
Ooh.
So please do keep your mics muted during the talk, and then we'll get to the reflections later. To have friends in need is sweet, and to share happiness, and to have done something good before leaving this life is sweet, and to let go of sorrow. What a beautiful verse, right? What a beautiful verse. To have friends in need, right? So to have a sense of connection and a way to be of service, a way to help in whatever small or large way we can. No? It's beautiful to hear the Buddha himself say this because I think of that as really the spirit of the tradition, the Mahayana traditions that come later, where there's this very strong emphasis on being of service to all beings and finding your compassion for all beings. And I think that is just a question of emphasis. I think that as we're seeing right here today, and as I've talked about before, that was already a theme in the Dharma, and it's even in its earliest expression, but it's one that comes forth in different ways. So this theme of friends in need, a friend in need is a friend indeed, right? We have the opportunity, we are presented with the opportunity to use our life energy in ways that help each other. And that has a very practical implication in terms of how we become community, how we feel about each other, and we feel connected to each other and supported by each other. But it also has a karmic implication. Yeah. So kama in Pali, or karma in Sanskrit, is the word for, you could say, a principle of reality. Yeah. Some of you know that I often liken it to gravity. So it is like a principle at work within the universe. And the word itself means action, and that's because karma is understood to be a principle that is engaged, or that is working out the results of intention. Intentional actions that we take, intentional speech that we make, intentional thoughts even have karmic results. So there's a word for that too. The result is called vipaka, although for some people, sadly, it's a little confusing that in the sort of general discourse about this, sometimes people will use the word karma to mean the result also, and not just the principle itself.
I'm doing a checking in with the Dhammadipa talk.
What?
Just, okay, thank you. We're good, we're good. So karma is this principle that is at work, and when we engage in wholesome, beneficial action, then that is basically putting the wheel of motion, if you will, the wheel of karma into action, such that it spits forth some kind of a result later on, right? So this is when we are helping each other. That's why the Buddha says, when you're helping others, you're also helping yourself. Right? Spoke about this a couple of weeks back. Because what you're doing is that you are building up a positive karmic momentum, a positive karmic future set of future karmic results in some way. It's not really, it's beyond the scope of human beings to be able to draw lines usually from point A to point B between one thing and another. Although sometimes it seems fairly clear. But karma, just like gravity, is an incredibly complex phenomena. Complex phenomena. The Buddha called it one of the imponderables, one of the things that even a Buddha could not describe with absolute precision, predict with absolute precision. But he understood its principles enough to be able to tell us a little bit about it. So we have this idea of helping our friends who are in need, sharing happiness. So we might take this to mean, in a very simple way, of, again, doing what we can to help others to be happy, help ourselves to be happy, but also the idea of mudita, so having joy for other people's joy. Again, very, very beautiful practice. I often say, if you only have joy when things go according to the way you want them to go, then great, you'll have a certain amount of joy in your life. But the fact is that if you have joy when other people also feel joy, then you have an exponentially greater amount of joy in your life, right? Many, many, many more opportunities to feel happy if you're happy when others are happy. No? So another way of creating a wholesome state, of enabling a wholesome state in the mind, right? So if you see, well, there's this subtle sort of thread that the Buddha is drawing here about different kinds of activities, all with this wholesome quality. And then to have done something beneficial, to have done something good before leaving this life is sweet. And I will say that having been a chaplain in the hospital and in hospice, that people do oftentimes reflect on what they did with their lives, right? And they want to have something beneficial to reflect on at that point. So, and again, this also has a karmic implication, right? So to have done something positive before this lifetime comes to an end, because that karmic stream is what is going to take rebirth, is going to take a new form as a way of completing, again, drawing out the results of the karmic intentional activities of this lifetime and of the ones before it. That's how we understand it. So, and I want to say this, that there's sometimes this idea that the very last moment of your consciousness in this lifetime is the most important one, and that actually determines what the quality of the next lifetime is going to be. And I will say, to me, that seems like quite a mistaken teaching, actually, right? We have in many, 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 many lifetimes of karmic resultants and karmic momentum and karmic energies that are unresolved and that will resolve. And all of that is all baked into what we can think of as a karmic stream, right? This life force. And so that last moment, it has an effect, certainly, like any other effect, but it's within a larger context of our life. It cannot be the only moment that matters, right? Because if that were the case, then you could do horrible things with all of your life and just have a really nice thought at the last minute there, and all would be well. But no, right? That's really not the teaching of karma. The teaching of karma is that literally, moment by moment, every time we're doing something with intention, we're setting up these causes and these future consequences. So, and that's a good thing in a way, because it also means that you have like a pool to work with, right? It's not that there's one make or break. So, continuing on, we have, so to have friends in need is sweet, and to share happiness and to have done something good before leaving this life is sweet, and to let go of sorrow. To let go of sorrow. So it doesn't mean not to have sorrow at all. It doesn't mean we block sorrow. Do you see the difference? But that when sorrow is present, that we don't cling to that any more than we try to cling to happiness. And this is a very human activity, to cling to a particular emotional state as what defines us, right? You hear somebody say, I'm a very angry person. Or I'm always depressed and I'll always be this way. But that, you could say, that is kind of a turning away from the nature of this mind. And the nature of this mind is the nature of change. It is of the nature of interaction and change constantly. In fact, that's one of the things that's frustrating about meditation, right? Right? You sit down and you want it to be a certain way, or you get to this lovely little, peaceful, comfortable place, and then boom, it's gone. And you think to yourself, but no, it should stay that way if my practice were stronger. But no, the nature of mind is the nature of change. That actually is why the Buddha says very clearly that while it is important for us to establish states of concentration and states of ease and tranquility in the mind, Those things are all important, actual necessary factors for awakening. It's also important to take that tranquil, focused, concentrated mind and turn it to the activities of this body and of this mind. And you turn it to observe the nature of activity change moment by moment. And that's where the insight is unlocked. Not in the concentration by itself. If it were the concentration by itself, then the Buddha would have already been enlightened when he went and practiced with Alara Kalama and Udakarama Buddha. Right? But he went to those wonderful meditation masters of his time and realized, but there's something missing here. What was missing wasn't the calmness or the subtleness of the mind that they were able to achieve, but the insights into the nature of impermanence. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. This letting go of sorrow is assisted, let me put it that way, so I tie it all back together, is assisted or supported by our recognition of the nature of impermanence in the mind. So we remind ourselves, right, if it seems like it's one solid block, if it seems like it's always been this way and it's always going to be this way, then perhaps we need to study the impermanence a little bit more to see actually how it is. And then there are, as I said earlier, there are principles. So it's different than the content, right? Sorrow is a kind of content, is a particular quality or state. And those things will be changing. Sorrow changes to happiness, changes to anger, changes to bliss, changes to tranquility, and so on and so on. But in that, when you study the activity, you also see the things that are the principles that are at work. You start to see the nature of impermanence as a principle that is always there, right? You start to see the interactivity of the body and the mind as a principle that is always there. The Buddha said, consciousness reverts back to the body over and over again. So you can see that as a principle that's happening. Even though the content will change, right? The taste of the emotions and these kinds of things will change. So by releasing your sorrow, perhaps you also have this experience of, and then what's there? When each moment, each quality of mind is released, then you see, what principle is actually still there? Yeah. So just to finish off this, and then we'll open it up for reflections. So the next verse is translated here by Byram as, to be a mother is sweet and a father. And I would say that's not how we would read the Pali. Actually, some of us would read the Pali slightly differently. Some folks trained in early tradition would read this Pali slightly differently to mean like care for one's parents, right? Supporting one's parents. And I want to acknowledge that some people have had parents who have been very, very destructive in their lives. And so you need to think about who your true mother and father actually are. Maybe. It might be your biological parents. It might be other folks in your life. And then he says, it's sweet to live arduously, fervently. And I really resonate with that. Live wholeheartedly, folks. The Dhamma isn't asking you to live anything other than wholeheartedly. Don't ever believe that there's something that holds you down within the Dhamma. That's not an accurate view. live arduously, and master yourself. How sweet it is to enjoy life, living in honesty and strength. And wisdom is sweet, and freedom. And wisdom is sweet, and freedom. So perhaps I return back to the beginning. Please don't carry your mistakes or carry your cares or cling to your sorrows. But know this one that is the whole rainbow of human experience, fully, wholeheartedly. And that very practice will lead you to absolute freedom. Okay, folks, that is what I wanted to share with you for today. And now we have some time for reflections or comments or questions on the talk or the meditation. Let's take a sip of water. Yes, Dick, please.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by the journey of the Buddha. In other words, he was able to access these deep concentration states in the first year of these 6 years of exploration. And then there's very little said. It's very condensed until his nights of the journey of awakening in the final stage. And it just seems a and it seems like he was alone with these other ascetics for most of that time after his deep concentration mastery. So it just seems like there's so much that happened in that period of time, realization, but there's very little, from my understanding, in the suttas of what actually was going on within his mind during that period. You hear the summation of it at the end. And it's just very intriguing to have such a capacity for concentration and seeing things deeply. And then another 5 years before the realization. Maybe you could comment on that. It's just very intriguing to me, that journey of time and the way it's described. Yeah.
Well, so what we do see in the suttas in terms of a discussion of the path that the Buddha experienced was that he tried all these forms of control also, right? So he was, a concentration master, and then he tried all these other things largely related to the control of the body, right? So he tried to hold his breath, for example, or he tried to, exert himself such that he said sweat would pour out from his armpits, or he tried to fast to the point of starvation, right? So what he did was that in line with, I think, many of the cultural ideas of his time in northern India in the 6th century BC, right? He thought, well, so somehow the body needs to be subdued in order for the spirit to come forth, or in order for something to break. But, having gone through that as well, he sets all that down, right? He sets all that down and he sees that that isn't working. So one is he tries various aspects of control, both of the mind and the body, and there are various ways that that's talked about in the suttas. Two is he has to acknowledge that it's not working. Time and time again, he stops and he says, oh, wait, holding my breath, this doesn't really seem to be, bringing an end to dukkha. So let me see what else I can do. And then thirdly, as I understand it, he actually has to find compassion for himself. Right? He has to find a sense of being willing to be the body and mind that he is, and to find a kindness and a gentleness with that, so that when that last moment, those last moments are described, and it's described as like Mara attacking him. So Mara, is like the dark side or the shadow side, whether you understand Mara to be an actual being, or you understand Mara to be his inner personal shadow or dark side. How does he conquer Mara? He doesn't conquer Mara by getting it to struggle, right? He conquers Mara by turning Mara's arrows into flowers. So meeting it with compassion, meeting it with gentleness, meeting it with not struggle, and not ignoring it either, right? But like meeting it with this gentle touch. So those are the kinds of pointers that I think we have in terms of the way that the story of the Buddha's awakening is told in that intervening period between when he learned about concentration and he actually had the insights that led to. And clearly the key insights also relate to karma, right? So when he talks about the 3 things that he saw on the night of his awakening, they're all about karma, how his own karma unfolded in various lifetimes, how other people's karma unfolds in their lifetimes, and then ultimately this description of the chain of dependent origination.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
So Claudia has her hand up, and then the other Claudia is going to ask a question, and then we'll be done. So, no sé, Claudia, si quieres, ¿cómo hacemos? Ya, Claudia, Claudia en Jalapa, por favor, prenda tu micrófono y yo traduzco por ti, ¿ok? Si quieres, o si quieres decirlo en inglés también se puede. Claudia en Jalapa. Ok.
¿Cómo puedo dejar de cargar esa piedra que he cargado toda mi vida? ¿Cómo?
So the question is, how can I stop carrying that stone that I've been carrying my whole life? Yes. Yes. So the first thing to do, la primera respuesta, bueno, tú le vas a traducir, ¿verdad, Claudia Gutiérrez? Sí, ok, bien. The first thing to do is to observe time and time again when you are carrying the stone. Just notice, just pay attention. Ah, yes, I'm thinking that thought of sadness again, or I'm reliving that moment of trauma again, or I'm angry about that thing that happened 30 years ago again, right? You just notice, you keep observing the times that you pick up the stone or that you touch the stone, right? Why? Because the one that observes the picking up of the stone is not picking up the stone. Do you see what I'm saying? That's the observer. The observer is free of the stone. Yeah? So first thing, you just start to acknowledge that you're doing it, and you build this what is slightly artificial, actually, separation between the picking up of the stone and the observing of the picking up of the stone. But the reason to do that is not so just that you see that it's happening, but that you also begin to study why it's harmful. How is that hurting you? How is that weighing on you? Because when you truly see and accept how you are causing your own suffering, then you will stop. You will just naturally stop because you know how it works. And then, as my dear friend and teacher, Blanche Hartman, the abbess, former abbess of San Francisco Zen Center, said, I see that train and I know where that train goes and I'm not getting on it. Yeah. Okay. Ok, entonces Claudia G, vamos a... ok, creo que ahora sí puedes.
Should I say in Spanish or in English?
I think in English is better. If
Okay. So I was thinking about what you were saying that whatever people is thinking in the last moment, that would influence a lot next life or whatever, or that it's a very important moment. And I remember these stories in Hinduism that if you think of Shiva, then you're Shiva, no? Like in the last moment where your mind is, you will go, kind of thing, no? And I always found it hilarious and sweet at the same time. But then I remember this other story of I think it's a Jewish story about a man that he was, terrible person, go out with many, many women at the same time. And then in one moment he realized, and God came and all the light, and, because he regret everything. And even the rabbis were jealous about it because with all their practice, they never got into that. No? So I was remembering those stories. And I think, I don't know if I agree, I agree with you, but then at the same time, I think, but maybe, when you're in the end of your life and you really, really realize something, you really, really, with all your heart, really, that is going to make a huge impact in your consciousness, in that stream, in that karmic stream. So I don't know. I was just reflecting on that. What do you think?
yes, it is absolutely true that you can have near the end of your life or at the end of your life a reckoning. You can have a sudden insight into how you have been behaving or how you've been leading your life or what your karmic results might be like, and have remorse, a good kind of remorse, let's say, or you might have rejoicing, or you might say, oh, there's something that I want to do. Very often, people find that they have some unfinished business at the end of life, and that's weighing on them. And if they can, they would want to have a conversation with someone or give some money for some purpose or something like that in order to help ease their hearts. So yes, it's true that you could have, let's say for the sake of discussion, a moment of remorse about some activity, something that you did for a long time in your life, over and over again in your life. Maybe you were a thief and you were stealing all the time, and at some point you say, okay, I regret that. That definitely changes, according to the way that the Buddha described it, that would definitely change the karmic result that comes from those activities in your life. If you had remorse about something unwholesome you had done, that shifts how the result comes out. Then the result would be less harsh if you had remorse about doing bad things. Similarly, if you rejoiced in doing your good things, that's also said to be great because you're sort of reinforcing the proper understanding. But again, the idea that somehow that moment could be overriding previous karma, or like erasing the whole effect of previous karma, is not held up in the early Buddhist sutras. In the early sutras, what the Buddha says is karma has to have its results, and we can change the way that those results come out by our practice of wholesome actions. But you can't really say, I just want it to not happen at all. You see what I'm saying? One example is that I forget which disciple it was that was injured. One of the arahants, one of the fully awakened students of the Buddha, was injured in the course of walking somewhere, and the Buddha said, "Oh yeah, so that small injury on his foot is actually the result, a karmic result of something really, really terrible that he did in his previous lifetime. But because he's done all this good work and he had remorse about it, then it comes out in this way, in this very minor way within his life. But it still has to come out in some way." So now we're over our time, and I just want to say thank you all for the wonderful comments and questions. And may all beings benefit from our practice here today. May all beings be released from all mental and physical suffering and realize absolute peace, compassion, and wisdom by the power of the Buddhas, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, and the efforts of each one. May all beings be liberated. All right, everyone. Wonderful to see you.